Sounds like we've got the warm-up music going on there. Excellent. Thank you. I imagine there'll be a few more people filtering in from lunch. I'm Dean Buckley. My company is Disruptive Analysis. I'm an industry analyst and advisor. This is the neutral host breakout. There's two panels today. I'm moderating the first one, and Luke Keogh's doing the second one. And we're going to be looking at my session on in-building neutral host opportunities. And the second half of the breakout is on metro densification. I've been following neutral host models for at least 5 years now, and private networks I've been looking at for 20. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that we seem to be getting to an inflection point in the idea of shared indoor infrastructure for multiple networks and network operators. It's going in slightly different directions around the world. Different approaches we heard on Dave Nowicki's panel earlier on. There's a couple of different examples of using CBRS in the US and other forms of distributed antenna systems, small cells, elsewhere as well. And there's lots of differences by type of building and use case. But hopefully we will be able to explore all of these in a bit more detail. Hopefully this is a clicker. Yes, right, that's me. My alter ego, if you are still on Twitter or X or whatever it's called this week, is Disruptive Dean, also on LinkedIn. And I do quite a lot of work on all of these type of areas. So what I'd like to do now is be the lazy moderator and ask the various panelists to introduce themselves, their companies, and their top-level view on sort of where they fit in neutral host. So I'm going to start with Kunal Bajaj from CloudXtel. Kunal, and there's a backup slide. Let me know when you want to.
No problem. So thank you so much, Dean. So good afternoon, everyone. CloudXtel is an India-based network as a service company. We basically started out life focusing purely on passive infrastructure sharing in fiber, but we realized about 8-9 years ago when we got started that as data capacity requirements are going to grow, the most difficult portion of the network is going to be the last mile. So we started serving all of the different aspects of the last mile on a neutral basis with telcos and ISPs as our customers. And I think one of the areas that we ventured into, which is of particular interest, is the shared RAN neutral host model that we've been able to deploy at the Mumbai railway systems. And as we proceed more and talk a little bit more on the panel, happy to share our learnings on that. We can skip this and sort of get into that as we go through the course of the panel. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Kunal. Next up, Paul Choiseul from American Tower. Paul.
Hi, everyone. Paul Choiseul, American Tower. I'm Vice President of Innovation, Corporate. As you guys may know, American Tower, very large infrastructure company, as our last name would indicate. The core is a tower business. We have some 226,000 towers in 25 countries. My role as a vice president of innovation is finding that next thing that will make our customers, the MNOs, lives easier, as well as finding innovation that can make things work more efficiently. On that road, we stumbled onto O-RAN, and we've done quite a bit of work in trying to optimize it and getting it to do certain things that we may be first in our group, and in some cases, depending on whom you ask, first in the world to execute on O-RAN networks that actually work for in-building type solutions. I'll share with you guys a little bit later a bit of some of the work that we've done on the lab.
Thank you very much. Next up is Shirish Nagaraj from Corning.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks, Dean. Shirish Nagaraj from Corning Wireless. I'm CTO of wireless of the wireless business unit there. We're part of the optical communications division. Specifically, the wireless part is focused on in-building solutions, both small cells and DAS. Come from a heritage of Spider Cloud Wireless and Mobile Access companies that were acquired by Corning a few years ago. And we have essentially now migrated all our solutions to 5G. We built the first 5G millimeter wave in-building solution, supporting both 28 and 39 gigahertz, and are now on an O-RAN platform for sub-6. that is essentially virtualized and ORAN compliant. So that's something that, and we truly believe the neutral host market that needs to take off, and that's what we've been working on for the past few years.
Thanks. It's interesting, both speakers just now mentioning ORAN for in-building, and I'll maybe come back and touch on that more broadly later on. Next up is Michel Schwartz from Nokia.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Dean. Michel Schwartz. I'm in Nokia. I'm heading the CX strategy execution. And at the same time, co-directing Nokia's global neutral host program, which is a program that we put in place to jointly between the customer organization and the business groups to increase the focus on this domain, right? We'll talk a little bit later, I'm hoping, on what we mean by neutral hosts, but it's a much larger field than in-building, but in-building is a major use case, right? It's developing very fast for good reason, and we have a good, we are monitoring essentially this, the growth of this business quite closely. In Nokia, as you know, we have a full portfolio of solutions, both on the mobile side and on the fixed side, as well on the software side and application side. So this is very helpful for us to draw on this strength and on our global presence in order to address this domain. So thanks for inviting me here.
Thank you. And actually, quickly, what does CX stand for? I've been wondering.
Oh, sorry, CX means customer experience.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was an industry term, but maybe I'm...
No, it often is, but I wasn't sure whether it had a different meaning in this context.
Right, no, that's what I mean.
Thank you. And lastly, Sophie James from Tech UK.
Thanks, Dean. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sophie James. I'm Head of Telecoms and Spectrum Policy at Tech UK. Tech UK, as the name hopefully suggests, we are the UK's Technology Trade Association. So we represent around 1,000 member companies across the entire tech landscape. But the program that I lead is called Communications Infrastructure and Services. So I'm really here today to represent our neutral host members and connectivity providers, because the members that I work with most closely are across fixed, mobile, satellite, and all domains. So yeah, nice to be here. Thanks, Dean.
Great, thank you. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight into the panel, ask a few questions. I will be taking questions from the floor later on, so have a think about questions and I'll get around to that towards the end of the session. I think I'm going to ask the panel, first off, to almost like define what's included in this term neutral host, because it was interesting on the stage earlier, we had neutral host and infrastructure sharing as the new name of the TIP group. And sort of infrastructure sharing potentially is anything and everything, down to sort of the cloud is multi-tenancy by default. Even satellites could be. But where are the boundaries? Michel, I know we were discussing this, and I know Nokia has a particular viewpoint on it, so...
That's right. Yeah, thanks. So for Nokia, neutral hosts essentially comprises the digital infrastructure owners, right? Owners of digital infrastructure assets, as well as some companies who have expertise in running digital infrastructure assets that rent or operate, or both, these assets to multiple tenants, right? And these tenants could be communication service providers or enterprise, or or both. So what we include in that in this category are digital assets that range from the fixed side to the mobile side, and also to the data center side, right, to the cloud side. And that's because the actual definition for us of a neutral host is literally an operator that is neutrally hosting a network. That means accommodating tenants from the operators to put in their connectivity services on the digital infrastructure. Okay, so it includes fiber companies, it includes tower companies, it includes also data center companies. It includes, for example, CSPs that have split up in a NetCo and ServCo. So the NetCo would become essentially a neutral host. Now, the question that you're asking, Dean, is where do we put the demarcation? Because you're right, if we include every single digital asset, then it becomes essentially open-ended. Well, we do put the demarcation at the operator of this asset controlling the asset essentially entirely, right? So if you look at the FiberCo, for example, they could be offering FTTH or a TowerCo, they could be offering an FTTH as a service, right? But getting just to the last splitter, right? But you can also have an FTTH as a service that goes all the way to the ONT, to the premise. And it's that control that determines that it's a neutral host.
Fair enough. Paul, I'm going to come to you, because obviously as a tower company, you may have a different view of the active versus passive, and what is neutral. What does neutral mean?
Actually, it's quite similar to to Michel's. As a neutral American Tower, depending on whom you ask, we created the model of the neutral host tower company. So from our inception, we are a neutral host. We are a real estate investment trust. So on our most base, from the base of the revenues of American Tower, it comes from steel and concrete and bringing in tenants. It's very simple. It's a very simple model. Now, if we fast forward to 2023, we've done some great work with Michel and Nokia. We've deployed neutral host, one of the first versions of a truly operator-controlled neutral host fiber operation.
I'm thinking probably more through the lens of in-building.
So from the lens of in-building, neutral host is primarily, to us it meant DAS, and it meant something that got deployed that allowed us to lease it to multiple tenants. We as a real estate investment trust, we really cannot deploy infrastructure that's not usable by at least 2 operators.
Great, thank you. Sophie, you mentioned you have neutral host members, so that should give you a good steer.
I do have, I'm very fortunate to work with some fantastic neutral host members. I was actually going to come at your question from a completely different angle, if that's okay. Because I'm coming purely from a UK perspective, and actually definition is something that we've been wrangling with all year as public networks now comply with the Telecom Security Act. And we are working with a 20-year-old definition of what is a public electronic communications network and services, and your supply chain is, you might think that part of that supply chain is a public service provider, but it's not. And you then have to make sure that you are complying with the Telecom Security Act that your operator is legally bound by. So I think that's just a really interesting real-life experience today of neutral hosts and the business models of working with operators, in building or outside, it doesn't matter, but where the public and private begins, I think is really fascinating.
I think that's a really interesting whole theme to look at, is the regulatory implications of in-building and what governments and regulators should be thinking about, either enabling it, regulating it, subsidising it maybe, and thinking about things like cybersecurity. So we'll maybe come back on that later on. Go for Kunal or Shirish.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I mean, like I mentioned earlier, when we thought of ourselves as a neutral host, it was all about passive infrastructure sharing, very much building up like a FiberCo and then a mini TowerCo in the sense that focusing on small cells. But I think to the point about control, which Michel has made, I think what we're doing today in terms of shared RAN has been happening, but through a neutral host, it's not really been happening very broadly, right? In some rural areas, yes, across the world, and we've heard about that with some successful stories. But really, if you think about moving increasingly into in-building, in-venue, and sort of large high-density solutions like stadiums and for us, railway stations, that's really where we see with particularly for emerging markets where TCO is going to be very, very important, and yet your data capacity expectations are through the roof, right? We have to carry more data than a typical venue or an in-building, or at least handle more subscribers and customers attaching to the network than probably attach anywhere else in the world. So the value proposition there comes in when you can control the network end to end, and if mobile operators basically sort of start trusting us to do that, to really be neutral, right? I mean, and really approach it from a neutral perspective. So I think that's the direction we see the evolution of neutral host in our environment going to, because otherwise telcos, by and large, are very specific about that control point, saying, okay, you know what, you do the passive, I will do the active, and let's keep that separate.
Certainly, my understanding is that your model is, I suppose you can call it bring your own spectrum. Yeah, it's using the operator spectrum.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, so from a RAN and DAS OEM perspective, from neutral host, we look at it essentially starting with shared infrastructure, right? So the moment that a system or a network is designed from day one with the intent of sharing, that's got to be the key. As opposed to what I would call as point solutions, which, for example, the Spider Cloud small cells were what I would call as point solution, operator specific, solving a customer pain point. These would be sort of the neutral host networks would be designed from day one to support multiple operators and multiple applications with a common fiber backbone that can serve fiber and powering, because all of these active electronics requires remote powering as well. So if you can have a common powering and fiber mechanism, that can be shared not only by, let's say, the cellular access units or access points or radio nodes, but also by other applications, even Wi-Fi or some security cameras and what have you. So essentially putting an entire transport fabric that is common, that can be shared across operators, across different applications. And the interesting thing is we are now moving from the typical neutral host scenario, which is more DAS-centric, or think of it as a DAS, to actually including the radio access network as a whole. So now brings in the operators, how do they bring in to the equation, and how do they sort of allow sharing across operators from the same common infrastructure point of view.
Thanks. Right, so one of the questions which often comes up when we're talking about in-building wireless is who pays for it? Whose job is it to provide indoor neutral host coverage? Is it the operators who should be pleased that they can service their customers? Is it the building owner that wants to increase their rents? Is it the individual tenants for their employees and visitors? Who pays? Or is the answer that it depends?
So, I mean, I would say all of the above, right? And I think, again, reflecting on our experience in India, I'll give you a wide variety of answers. So when you're going into the airport or into a metro station, the airport and metro provider actually look at this as a rent that they can earn and as a revenue earning opportunity to basically enhance the minimum that they have to pay for pay to the government. So they then bid this out, and you get crazy prices because all of the DAS providers are competing against each other to get that right. So in that situation, what ends up happening is the venue provider, though you would think that an airport would say, well, it's kind of a must-have to have really good 4G and 5G connectivity here when people are traveling, people are landing from abroad, but they actually flip it on their head and sort of bid that out. Now, increasingly, what's happening over time is the telcos are pushing back and saying, you know what, we just won't provide the network. I mean, you have to bring your rents down. This is crazy what you're expecting us to pay because we can't afford it. But on the other side of the spectrum, what we're finding is your sort of more mature, very large real estate builders have realized that, you know what, it makes sense to partner with a company and sort of do it from day one, right? And where it's not just about DAS or other in-building solutions, but you're actually doing the whole FTTH, you're doing IoT, you're doing security, you're doing all of that. Just do it when you build it, because the cost of building a building vis-a-vis putting this in, it's like a fraction of an increment, right?
And presumably you can then capitalize it, and you just say the building project is X million, and this
exactly
3% goes on this.
Yep, and that's it. And then once you have the right partnership in place, then really the only thing, at least in the Indian environment, then the telco comes in, and the only thing they have to pay for is just that telco or telecom equipment capex that the neutral host is putting in, and the OpEx to run the network.
Paul, I was going to say, Paul, when your customers are the telcos, so you're used to sort of telcos paying for stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't think of a situation where we've deployed a major airport, a subway system, a racetrack with a DAS that did not start with a request from an operator. The MNOs are interested in making sure that their quality is as good outside as it is inside.
But does that? Sorry, I was about to say. But I was going to say, does that scale down? Yeah, if it's like
it's primarily for large venues. Right. I mean, I think that's the key. The cost of deploying DAS, just thinking of the basics, even the equipment room. I mean, all the things that go into a DAS deployment that should be done at the time when you build the network out. When you build, actually, when the building is going up, all that stuff is just so heavy, it's so expensive that a building operator may not find the value in it.
I was just laughing because of the subway, London Underground. They have approached that as an asset for us to deploy underground in building. So it's not in building, it's underground. But yeah, that's the neutral host provision, and that's cracking on. But I think that in terms of that collaboration on who pays, it totally depends on who and where. But I think we were talking earlier about the Freshwave example in 22 Bishopsgate, because it's completely unique. I would say in terms of they built it up. Yeah.
And the tenant pays. Floor by floor is different. So if you're this is a site in London where it's a new office tower, and the building owner pays for coverage in the public spaces, but then each tenant. So if you're a bank on the 47th floor, you get asked, do you want to have coverage from MNO 1, 2, 3, and 4, or just a few of them, and do you want Wi-Fi as well? So they're actually charging it per floor per tenant, as well as the building owner, which is interesting. Yeah. But you've come, the JOTS neutral host.
Yeah, JOTS is a fascinating, example. It's a forum that's been around since 1999. It's operator led, and it's a specification whereby if you are building infrastructure for the UK's MNOs, you abide by these specifications, and most recently they have specified neutral host in buildings. So. We see that as a real kind of world first, and something that I know that is hopefully of interest to everyone here, because it is specifying neutral hosts in building, and it will be signed off and used by the MNOs. So they know that if you are abiding by their specifications, you will be delivering the service level that they want. Much to Kunal's point on his operators as well.
Sure.
Yeah, just one thing to maybe add. Agree with everything that was said. The landscape is also evolving. So operators definitely, what we find, pay for the very high-profile venues and high public venues, but anything else, they're looking at it as an asset that can be monetized. And now the interesting question is about the marketplace. So who pays now, right? And who's going to pick up the tab? That's going to evolve, I think, over time.
Michelle, you're the person selling. Who's writing the checks?
Right, that's the thing. I concur with everything that was said. Essentially, we see all these models developing, really. It's really all of the above. That's the answer. We see also some interesting propositions where, first of all, it is partially country dependent, right? In some countries, it is usual that this type of deployments is done operator-based. In some others, it is usual that it is an agreement between the venue owner and the neutral host to deploy this type of systems. But we're also seeing some propositions where an operator is asking for this type of deployment while asking for neutral host type specifications, right? That means that in their mind, they would be the anchor to themselves and then accommodate other competitors to come in. Now, we have not seen this to be a prevalent use case, but it is. We are seeing it coming. But just to give an anecdote about London, in fact, I read last week that I think it was a study that was done by Wired Score. Right. They said that apparently in London, the rents tend to go higher by 5 to 9% if the building is certified as top connectivity. So that means that there is a true incentive for building owners, even for residential buildings or office building owners, to fit the bill.
I suppose the follow-up from that, though, is how many buildings can realistically be deployed? If I've got a medium-sized hotel and I want to have good coverage, and it's not greenfield construction, but it's like, is it a case of I'll take the number, you are number 6,482 in the queue, please take a seat and we'll get to you in the year 2034? How do we accelerate this? If what's the capacity? Can we build out hundreds a year, thousands a year, even with ORAN, for example? Does it change that?
I think one thing I'd say to that, to facilitate the sort of ecosystem taking off, is the mechanism of cooperation between operators. That needs to be really worked out very well. So if you look at a DAS deployment, they're fairly independent except for some sharing arrangements. But when you start looking at an end-to-end architecture with ORAN, now there's a whole management plane and there's a lot more sort of sharing that has to happen. So to the extent that these cooperation models can be sort of set in stone and cookie cutterized, and then for somebody else, like a neutral host operator, to take that and scale, that would be, I think, the right model.
Thanks. Paul, I mean,
I think so the very large venues that needed DAS have already been deployed. Unless a new mall comes up or a new airport is built somewhere, those are already done. Growth is going to be very slow, a hard slog.
Do they do upgrades? So do they like, oh, we've had this DAS for 5 years or 10 years, but it's not 5G capable?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's a good segue into innovation. So, do you stay with DAS? The physics of it just conspire against 5G. You have a single cable that's going up and down a building. You have a SISO network by default. So now it's time to upgrade to 5G. Right now, if you tell me upgrade right now, like we're doing for a number of facilities in Vegas, getting the city ready for the F1 race, the requirements are make 5G happen now. Hey Corning, what are you doing? What do you have for 5G? Oh, I have this big, nice network, and we can help you out. Yes, we can do that. But we're also working on overlays, so ORAN overlays onto this 5G network that cost a fraction of what this upgrade would have cost, and don't tie us down to a particular antenna technology. So now we can replace radios if we want to go to 64-way MIMOs, whatever speeds, whatever capacities, and now 5G to 6G, 5G to 6G is not going to require an act of Congress anymore.
Go for it. Kunal, you've got 9 sites at the moment going to 16. I mean, if someone gave you enough money, how many zeros could you put on that?
So, I think basically from a scaling perspective, right, we have the advantage that there's still a lot of new infrastructure which is being built. And that's going to create a large enough market for us to make it quite attractive. And to the point of the upgrades, right? Every single DAS is SISO, right, today, and it is barely carrying 4G to the level of quality that's needed because it was built originally for 2G. So even all those need to be upgraded, and I think that's a huge opportunity. But you're right. How quickly can one actually roll it out? And it comes back to can you justify a savings? If you can, then I think actually we have. I won't say infinite, obviously it's all limited, but if you can justify the TCO, then,
I'm going to call up your slide.
The next slide, yeah, exactly. So it's the one after this. So if you look at...
One more?
One more, yeah, this one. So in terms of what we've been able to do with our neutral host shared RAN deployment today, because of the ability to actually share the OpEx side, not so much the CapEx side yet, though our friend Michel sitting over here is going to be helping with us with that because it's his equipment. But on the OpEx side, because we've been able to get a lot of efficiencies, and we get some efficiencies in the cost of deployment and things like that, we're already delivering almost 30% TCO ownership to if the telcos were to go and deploy their own active networks on an end-to-end basis. And we're not even comparing to DAS over here right now in this model because DAS would have never been able to pick up this type of traffic because there's no MIMO that would have been possible. And then the next challenge becomes that, okay, can we deliver 30% cost of ownership, total cost of ownership savings inside a building? If we can do that, then I think the sky's the limit.
I'm going to flip on to the next topic. And Paul, this is one of your slides, which I thought was interesting, partly because it's a good example of an industrial setting, but also because it's got both private 5G and neutral host on the same site, the same infrastructure. What do you see as the relationship between private networks and neutral host networks?
Well, to us, there's no such thing as a private network. We will not go in and deploy a private network. We would deploy a hybrid network. We would deploy a private network that could be leveraged for us as a neutral host to offer it to our customers, our traditional customers, the MNOs. What you're looking at here is our sandbox in Aachen, Germany, where we basically decided to throw everything at the requirements and to try to see what came out. And essentially, we have, with the participation of Sienna, Airspan, and Capgemini, we ended up with, almost a one of each. So the transport is one vendor, the core is a different vendor, the radio access is a different vendor, and we were able to stick the landing. This is a network that's functional right now. We continue to throw use cases at it. We continue to optimize it, modify it. But this was the birthplace of our O-RAN in-building technology. Now we have, in Las Vegas, we have a 40,000 square meter facility that was basically, as you mentioned, an overlay to an older DAS network that's delivering, I would say, about 3 to 4 times the throughput of what you can find from the MNOs that are not using that network right now. But the idea is that in-building network is going to be leveraged for ultra-low latency requirements that will have some end computing happening right at the facility, turning it into an edge facility. But at the same time, there's a component that allows any operator to come in. We're developing an API interface that will allow operators to basically run their business as they run it today.
Thank you. Michel, Nokia has your unit, which is looking at shared infrastructure and neutral host, but you've also got the private networks, or I can't remember, do you call it dedicated networks, or is that the other guys?
Right.
Are they linked, or are they sort of have like a narrow overlap on that Venn diagram? What does it look like?
Well, I mean, the private wireless is a business unit, right? While the neutral host program is a corporate function that looks at, increasing the focus on the neutral host segment. So they're separate things. But maybe to comment just real quick on because you were alluding to the size of the market earlier. In addition to everything that was said, it's also important to note that this market has a component that is greenfield deployment and another component that is upgrade, right? Slated for upgrade. I mean, today, 2% of the addressable buildings, only 2% globally, have some sort of a system inside. So there's a lot to be done. It's a very, very big opportunity. In terms of upgrade, we're talking a lot today about upgrade to 5G because of the DAS limitations in terms of performance indoor. But this has also something to do with the penetration rate of 5G-enabled devices in that particular country, right? So it is going at different rates globally.
I understand. I was going to say, are there any questions on the floor? Because I promised to right. So we've got Paul there. Don't know if I can get a microphone to and Shirish, if you can combine your answer that you were going to say, hopefully it'll align with whatever Paul's got.
Great, thanks. So Paul, you were mentioning with the slide you've got behind you about the data center as you got it expressed. In that particular case, it looks to be an on-premises edge.
Yes.
Have you experimented pulling eCPRI, RF over glass, etc., to pull things back to a more centralized location and pool that?
Yes, actually, the network that I was referring to, the one that we have in Vegas, it's actually the core is running from AWS, although we have split the network, so some of the processing is being done locally. So we're able to handle both that our ability to deploy very quickly with a very light construction requirement. So we're with this, I mean, we're looking at a network that is covering 40,000 square meters, 42,000 square meters with 13 radios right now, 13, 14, maybe we might end up with 15 radios when we're done with this. The cost of doing this is maybe, I don't know, one-tenth of the cost of building a DAS network. Yes, it's leveraging existing fiber and as such, but it's we're definitely looking at exactly that. It's
yeah, I'm gonna have to sort of we're about to run out of time, so I'll probably deal with that offline if we can. Shirish, I know you wanted to make a comment on the 5G, and then
very quickly. I think the critical thing, at least what we believe, is that the network architectures that have to evolve have to be flexible to support various combinations. So that's very important, because we don't have an answer that fits all. So whether it's a public network or neutral host network that comes first with a private 5G as an add-on, or vice versa, and we've been debating this, we don't want to prescribe the answer, or the architecture should be flexible. Whether it takes an ORAN input or a traditional RF input, the system should be able to do that, because in all cases, the distribution and the base station capacity may not be the same from the same person. And back to the point that the question that was asked, even on the virtualization side, the CU, for example, workload function, the core network function, can be really in a central cloud, whereas what we believe is the DU functionality and thereon really has to be on-prem. So I'll just leave it at that.
Sophie, final word. Are you?
Yeah, I was just going to sum up really just purely from a UK perspective that I think shared access, sharing infrastructure is definitely the way forward. There's much more that we can do. And yeah, I was just going to steal, I think it was Michelle's slide, 80% of time we're indoors. So we absolutely need to make sure that is an inclusive connectivity for all. So yeah, there's much more to do.
Great, and unfortunately we're out of time. I think we could have gone on for another hour easily, and I've got an indoor panel tomorrow on the main stage. But I think one of the things I'd like to leave people, especially if there's anyone from a policy point of view, is governments and regulators should be thinking about indoor wireless, including neutral host, as well as things like Wi-Fi and other things as well. Thank you, and I'd like to thank all the panelists as well for a really good debate this day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying with us this afternoon for our next panel, next discussion. I feel like we kept the best part for the end, because now we will take a look at some real-world examples of what actually has been done in the urban settings of a couple of cities in Europe. And we'll have a nice panel of representatives of the innovators in two cities, City of Dublin and City of Barcelona. And we also have speakers from the infrastructure providers. So they'll share their experience. A lot of work has been done in cooperation with TIP, with the neutral host efforts in the City of Dublin. But first of all, I'd like to ask each of our speakers today to tell us a few words about themselves. Go to the next slide. We'll start with Luke.
Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be here. My name is Luke and I'm a telecoms advisor with Dublin City Council. I've worked with the team in Dublin City Council for a few years and we've worked on developing an in-house telecoms unit, and that has led to a number of different outputs. One of them being shown on the screen here. You can see this is a project we've done in partnership with Cellnex and the Telecom Infra project. It's an all-in-one small cell in a smart bin form factor. It's really sexy in person. You don't notice it on the street. It's really nice. So I'd advise you to take a look into it afterwards. But that's me.
Thank you.
Hi there. So this is Marc Perez from Barcelona City Council. I'm working at the IT innovation team. And well, we are fostering the collaboration with telecom and MNOs in order to, have a good coverage capacity networks in the city. As we are just hosting, Smart City Expo. We are hosting also Mobile World Congress. We are hosting also the America's Cup. So we need to have, strong connectivity there.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, we go, William.
Hello, everyone. My name is William from Cellnex. So I'm working on innovation, so exploring new ways to share, to be neutral host. So this is our work today, and we are cooperating with cities and other actors in the ecosystem to move forward on this neutral host.
Thank you, William. And we have also Paul.
Hi, Paul Schrazel. I'm with American Tower. I'm Vice President of Innovation. I'll be sharing with you guys some of the work that we've been doing on the technology front, as well as a couple of use cases where we've been collaborating with city governments, city and regional governments.
Thank you, Paul. And we also
Hi, everyone. My name is Mai Truanle. I'm working in Vantage Towers in New Technologies and Innovation team. Just a reminder, Vantage Towers is a spin-off of Vodafone. We've been becoming independent in March 2021, so I would say that we are kind of young and a startup, but with really strong foundations because we have the 80,000 sites from our father, I would say, Vodafone. So thanks for having me today, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to have you and listen to your stories. And the cities, they have a very specific environment. We heard earlier today about the indoor implementation of neutral host. Indoor locations like the stadiums, the airports, hotels are parts of the city, but the city infrastructure has a very specific need to balance what's publicly controlled, publicly operated infrastructure with the private interests of its stakeholders, which include different businesses, enterprises, but also the citizens. At the same time, the cities have their own ambitions, actually, to use the next generation technologies to become smarter, actually, to utilize that connectivity to build what we call smart city. So it's really a balancing act between different things, and that involves facing a lot of challenges and complications of a very specific character, which you can see only in an urban environment. So first, let's look at what has already been done in one great example with the city of Dublin. So Luke is going to share his story and show some slides.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Celiana. So we in Dublin City Council, we embarked on our telecoms journey a number of years ago by setting up a pilot in the Docklands district called Smart Docklands. And for anyone that doesn't know Dublin, that is kind of the FDI centre where all the tech companies, the startups and all are located. And we partnered there with Dense Air, which is a neutral host operator in Ireland, and they have operations in UK, Portugal, New Zealand, elsewhere. They have a dedicated slice of the 3.5 gigahertz band, so they were an ideal partner. They were someone that had clout, and at the time they were bankrolled by SoftBank. Now that has changed since. They're now with Alphabet and Sidewalk Infrastructure Partners. And from there then, all along the way, we've done a lot of work with the Connect Research Centre, and they've been instrumental in the progress that we've had in Dublin City Council. So they're hosted in Trinity College Dublin, and the researchers there, I think Marco actually is here, I saw him, have done some really good work and close work with us on understanding the challenges that the city faces and the challenges that we need to overcome in order to ensure that we're providing the best connectivity. You know, Dublin as a city has grown tremendously in the last 10 years, as a tech hub, and it's really important that, with the tech ecosystem being so strong domestically, that, we have world-class telecoms infrastructure. And that brings us along then to some of the partnership that we've engaged in with the likes of the Telecom Infra project, who came in on the Connected City Infrastructure project, which was a solutions group within TIP. The Dublin City Council was a big player in, and it was mainly focused on passive sharing of telecoms infrastructure. And you would have seen one of the biggest output of that you would have seen is the slide at the intro there with the Big Belly, which is the bin manufacturer. It's a smart bin, and it houses the radios alongside the actual bin component, and then you have the antenna on top, which is an Irish manufacturer. So it's a really, really, really nice and discreet solution. And within Dublin City Council, we kind of thought that there was a lot of challenges we were facing. Access to power was a huge challenge. The National Electricity Operator in Ireland, ESB, didn't have a platform that would easily enable us to provide power access for small cells. And fibre as well was a big challenge. Despite Dublin having quite a vibrant data centre belt and a lot of dark fibre connectivity, the actual mapping of fibre assets was very poor. And that makes it quite challenging when an operator comes to us and they want to deploy equipment in the city environment. And just to give you one example that always kind of makes ourselves embarrassed a little bit internally, we would have found instances after mapping our assets that operators were actually subletting some of our own infrastructure that we didn't even know we had in terms of ducting, and that just shows, I suppose, the problem that was there. So we took action a number of years ago. We set up the telecoms unit within Dublin City Council, which is a dedicated telecoms function, and the City Council have brought in experts, consultants. It's housed within the Smart City team to overcome some of these challenges, and a lot of them are cultural challenges within the organisation itself. So if you think about if an operator like Vodafone wants to deploy a small cell, they have to put in their plan and application. It has to go through multiple different departments in the City Council, go through the roads department for road licenses, the planning department, and it's quite messy. It takes a lot of time, which adds to infrastructure cost, and just makes, in many cases, rollout of small cells not commercially viable. So we took action, and we developed the telecoms unit within Dublin City Council, and we have quite an ambitious programme of works now where we're kind of collaborating with a lot of different companies in the industry. We've been engaging in a lot of test beds. We meet quarterly now with the Irish Business Confederation. You can see their logo here, and that brings together, it's a common forum in Ireland for all mobile operators, towercos like Cellnex and Phoenix, to come together and discuss some of the challenges facing the industry and how we can kind of overcome them and solve them. And we have a lot of work to do. but we've made good progress in terms of mapping assets, developing rate cards for access to infrastructure, and we do a lot of thought leadership as well. So we've published some reference documents with TIP and the World Economic Forum as well more recently. And more recently, my colleague Jamie, Jamie Cudden leads up the Smart City unit in Dublin City Council. He has done some work with the CTA, which is the City Telecoms Association, and there was a huge announcement last week that a global kind of conglomerate of 20 cities are coming together to share telecoms expertise, and Dublin are leading that, and it's a really positive development.
Thank you. Look, would you like me to go to the next slide?
No, I think that's okay.
Thank you. It's great that you mentioned that all your experience you have documented with TIP, and it's available for other cities who want to take, because it seems that's a big discovery process into knowing your resources within the city, what's possible, and bring people together in a certain group to manage and all.
Exactly, and at the end of the day, there are common challenges. You know, Dublin is not necessarily hugely different than London or other cities. Of course, there's a difference in density, but the needs are the same in terms of connectivity. You know, there are areas that are deprived of connectivity, that they're underserved. The commercials aren't sound for the operators. You know, there's market failure in some areas potentially, and you know, it's important that the city councils play a more proactive role to enable that investment, because at the end of the day, it's benefiting citizens and business, which the council obviously is closely aligned with those goals.
Thank you. Look, and let's move slides. Let's see.
I think that I don't have slides. So
oh, you don't have Mark's slides. Okay.
So, yeah,
we'll imagine Barcelona then.
Yeah,
I think we know the city.
So Barcelona has joined as the CTA's Telecom Association. Just so the message, I think the big message here is that we need to go together, for example, to the European Commission in the case of Europe, in order to see how the new acts or for example, Gigabit Act, can easily foster the deployment of small cells in public furniture, for example. So this is something that as a city, so as a public servant in a city, we want to foster this. So for example, in the Code Act, we found Article 57 said, okay, you can use as operator, you can put antennas, small cells, SAWAPs in this case, in the public furniture, but nobody solved the problem of energy, for example. So it's okay, you can put the antenna there, but it's not going to work. So and you will need the city in order to power it. So we need to think in a more realistic way on that, because as a city, as a public servant in cities, and also telecoms operators, towercos, MNOs want to have a deployment that should be as efficient as possible from the economic perspective. So technical issues must be solved jointly with the public, with the civil servants that are maintaining this public furniture. So this is one of the things that I want just to put on the table. Another thing that is also important is, as I say, so legal aspects, for example, energy sharing, how we can solve that. Another aspect that is also important is who is going to pay. Because if you want to put a small cell in that traffic light, for sure my provider who is maintaining this traffic light will want to be there, just to see that everything is going to be well deployed, following all the rules. Because if something is going wrong, then there's something that is really important. Who is going to be guilty? The city? The MNO? The towerco? I don't know. So we need to ensure that everything is correct, it's correctly installed, and everything it's in the right place. So we need to talk about fees. We need to talk about protocols of sharing. We need to talk about all legal aspects that are not taken into account yet, in order to ensure that the deployment can be as as efficient as possible.
Thank you, Marco. It's amazing work that goes in, and as you say, I was just wondering, do you know where to start? What's the first issue, how to tackle, how to get people together?
Well, yeah, so with Vantage we are deploying we don't want now to call it pilots. So we are deploying pilots since 2014, about small cells, I'm saying just sharing protocols. So we need to go now to something that is going into production. So let's say a model that can be scalable enough. So for sure, the energy provider for one small cell, they will not put any problems. The problem is when you want to connect 1,000 small cells. Now we have a problem. So we need to ensure, we collaborate with Telnex, with Vantex, much with.
Maybe Mike can tell us more.
Yeah, may I?
Sure.
So I think this panel is really linked together with the previous panel, that is the neutral host, because as you were saying, who is going to be responsible of if something is happen, or I have, I don't know, lampposts, this lamppost, or I have this traffic light. So I think the model of the neutral host is that what we need? And I think Deep is helping on that. I think David this morning and also John is talking about this group that they're re-emerging again. And I think we need something like that because it's not something that I think all together needs to solve. No, not just, for example, Vantage Towers or Telnex or American Towers. I think it's something that we have to do, all together.
I think, from my perspective, I think that's handled best within the format of public-private partnerships. It's when the local government and either the neutral host operator or whomever it is, they come together in a format where you define who the operator is, and that by itself takes care of who's responsible for what. Now you have to figure out who pays for it now, and that's all. It's all in the contractual agreement. It's all in how you format this public-private partnership. At American Tower, we've been working with local governments from many different angles for a long time. We are the de facto power company in many regions in Africa. We have some 20,000 energy sets out there. We're providing Wi-Fi coverage for some communities where needed. But more recently, what we've encountered are requests, and we're very customer driven, and it's the customer makes the request, and they drive us to come up with a solution. And right now we're in the process of working with the city of Paris. We have a project out there called Paris to Connect, which is essentially a tour de force from a technological perspective on the art of what can be done. It's essentially, we're talking about connectivity of vehicles to everything. It's pedestrian avoidance technologies. It's logistics. It's transportation efficiency. So all this in about 3.5 kilometers worth of Paris. And we're working on also what's really next. So with the city of, with the Department of Transportation, the state of Virginia, and Virginia Tech University, we're developing that next thing. So even LiDAR technologies, radar, at short distance, to let the car know that a pedestrian is heading his way in a blind corner and as such.
William, would you?
Yes, yeah, I think it's very interesting to have this discussion here because at the end we have all the same problem. So we need to work together on try to solving this problem because we were talking about Dublin, Barcelona, and other cities, and the issue is that today we don't have a standard for deploying this kind of solution. So we need to work together in order to establish this kind of standard for deploying cities and try to leverage all the existing infrastructure that we have in the cities. We don't have only some part of the infrastructure, but we are also deploying, for instance, the metro solution, so how we can combine this kind of cities solution, the metro solution, so this is something that we need to improve in the future. So now we have some levels of maturity regarding the technical specification. For instance, Dublin was very interesting for us to learn how to deploy this kind of solution, but this is only a first step because the technical was the sharing on the passive way, but we need also to have this, the second stage on the active way, how we can share this active infrastructure, which is better than the passive. So I think it's something that we need to work together, and this is something that needs to be clarified in the future. And I think something that could accelerate that is the Gigabit Act from the European. I think it's very interesting to work in this scope as well. And also on scope 3 reduction of CO2 emission, or the emission in general. This is something that could help us, the industry in general, the telecommunication industry, to move forward on this scope 3 as well.
Absolutely, I absolutely echo what you said, William. And the Gigabit Infrastructure Act, from the perspective of a city council, is hugely consequential in terms of our own administrative processes internally. So for anyone that's not aware, it's a new act that's going through the European Commission at the moment, that's being directed by the European Commission, and it will effectively mean that things like road opening licenses and things will be streamlined, and that will have, while it sounds quite basic and very on the ground kind of stuff, it actually has a huge impact, and will have a huge impact on the pace of rollout, the cost of rollout. So we see that as a really important upcoming piece of legislation that will have a positive impact on the city environment. And I think what William mentioned as well is really important, that kind of story arc almost of going from supporting passive sharing and moving towards the more active sharing model, which is a challenge as a city council. We've had a very, very difficult process negotiating and collaborating with the mobile operators. And that's why Cellnex has been so good, because the operators are more willing to work with a neutral partner like them. And the operators are afraid oftentimes to relinquish control of their network, and you can see why. And they have traditionally been averse to active sharing. But my own view, and kind of what we're seeing in the market, is that the economics and the challenge in economics that face operators now will push them towards these kind of active sharing solutions in some environments, particularly environments where there's somewhat of a force and function, where there's no option but to share actively because there's not enough space or whatever. And the infrastructure providers will play an important role in that, and the city council has to be a facilitator of that. And the operators as well, will I suppose play ball.
As you mentioned, the power consumption and also the real estate of the city, I guess with the new European requirements for the environment, that will be even opening the case for even more sharing and having a clean city, right? Environmentally friendly. So, yes, go ahead, William.
Yeah, so I mentioned before the scope 3, which is very important in the industry in telecommunication, and the model where we have this neutral host is very interesting for all the actors at the end. So I think promoting this kind of solution is one way to move forward on this scope 3 as well. And I think the collaboration of all the actors in the ecosystem, MNOs, cities, and neutral hosts at the end is key to move forward on that. So maybe I don't know if you can share my slide.
Yes, we can go to
so this is something interesting that.
Let me see.
Yeah, so I just try to illustrate that the past, the present, and the future of sharing. So you see in this first picture that there is many things deployed, which is not necessarily today the optimal for sharing. And the second example is the Dublin city that we developed together with the city, Cellnex and City. And this is one model that today we are promoting. So this model needs to be expanded also, and maybe provide some reference standard for doing that in the present. But the problem is that we have this discussion which is each city. So the issue is that we need to redo each time the same discussion, how we can move forward on this kind of solution. And this takes time, and this is something that is not optimal to move forward on this kind of solution. And the last one is a picture that we are doing in Italy, which is very interesting because we are centralizing all this garbage that we have there in one premises. And then we expand to the public and also to the private coverage for indoor and also for the city. That helps us to reduce compared to the Dublin case. So this is quite optimal that we are looking forward to in the future as well.
Thank you. I know somebody else also had a slide. Do you want?
No, I just wanted to add, because here we're talking about sharing, passive sharing, active sharing, but that's not depending on us. It's more towards the MNOs. So I think that another thing that we could try to do together, I don't know how, but is try to move the MNOs towards that. I know that slowly they're doing it, because in the UK they started the RAN sharing in 2012, I remember, because I was part of that. And then we have Spain now. And I think slowly the MNOs are moving towards that, but I think we have to do something to speed that up. Otherwise, we kind of depend on their timing rather than, because maybe we're ready, but they're not ready. So I think it's one of the challenges that I think we need to take into account.
Exactly, and I think one of the other areas as well that's not appreciated enough is the distinction from the operator's perspective between, in the small cell context in the city environment, between the NSA version of 5G and the standalone version. So the deployment that you've seen there on the display, that was facilitated by Cellnex, but it was 3, the operator that's involved in that. It's a full 5G spec, the 3.5 gigahertz band, but some of the feedback we've got for them is that the economics in terms of the footprint of users that site can target are not necessarily at the point that they need to be at yet, and that will require the move to standalone when it becomes, from a technical standpoint, much easier to move users between different sites and things like that. So there is still some way to go, but we are quite confident, looking from a macro perspective, looking at the industry, that a combination of the economic challenges facing the operators, technical trends in terms of moving from the NSA to standalone version, will ultimately, compel some changes. And I know, there's been bad experiences of active sharing in the past. In Ireland, there was an active sharing program that has been dismantled. I know the UK is similar as well. It's in the process of doing so. So, much of it is about an education piece as much as a previous experience piece. So it's about educating different players in the market about the way forward, and what's best. Because at the end of the day, we want the same thing, and that is to improve access to connectivity in the city environment in a low-cost means that reduces environmental impact at the same time.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe you can show my slide. So here's a bit, just segueing on what you were saying about the future. So this is what the work that we're doing right now with the Department of Transportation of the state of Virginia, Virginia Tech, and several partners. And it's essentially bringing together a few of the things that we're doing with Parents to Connect, but trying to take it to the next level. So this is essentially leveraging edge processing, artificial intelligence, LiDAR technology to detect the walkers. It's the roadside units that are connecting to the onboard units from a major German manufacturer that starts with an A. And essentially, we continue to try to evolve, try to take the technology to the next level, but not just for the sake of us being warm and fuzzy and happy, but for the development of the next use cases that you guys are going to need. This is beneficial for the local population. This is beneficial for traffic control. This accelerates, this decreases traffic congestion. If it wakes up drivers because the light just turned green and something on their dashboard says go, instead of the guy who fell asleep for 20 seconds. So it's all in how to make all these technologies happen using ORAN technology, bringing in partners who are quite capable of getting us across the finish line and doing it efficiently, creating the interfaces that will simplify our customers, our end customers, the MNOs, to interface with this thing, as well as you guys, for the users the city needs.
Absolutely. I think the point you made about use cases is really important, because at the end of the day, the network is serving different use cases, and in the city context, as you mentioned, it could be anything from traffic management to air quality monitoring, which is a a burgeoning area now that we've done a lot of work in ourselves, and we've partnered with Google and the City Council in Dublin to do some kind of advanced mapping of air quality in the Dublin context, and it's important that the underlying connectivity is there to support that, and that will require collaboration with community stakeholders as well. We actually have to speak to the people on the ground to understand what are their needs, what are their preferences, and we've done a lot of outreach programs and speaking to those in the research community as well, and the Connect Centre with Trinity College, to understand what's coming ahead, to be at the forefront of what's coming.
Thank you. Yeah, from what I'm getting from all of you is that cooperation is really crucial, as we don't want to each city discover the wheel from themselves, right? And we want to have, if I can say, the blueprint or sharing of the use cases available, and maybe help with the processes, where to start, where to look at. And I think the infrastructure providers are a good mediators and a way to share this knowledge, right? And the use cases.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's working side by side with the government entities, with the local government. Right. The city knows where the pain points are. If he needs air quality monitoring, if another city needs noise control, whatever the needs are, the sensors are there, and we have the transport technology. It's just a matter of bringing it all together. Yes, I'm not trying to trivialize the amount of work that's gone on to make this happen, but my point is it's getting there. It's getting there, and it's just a matter of working with you guys, with the city governments, and understanding what your needs are. Let us know where the pain points are, and I'm sure all you guys are the tower companies, the neutral host tower companies. We have our R&D departments that are working, that are hard at work in making this happen.
Yes, so just to add here, that's one of the main objectives of the Cities Telecoms Association. So for sure it is needed to have some kind of interoperability, some kind of standards in order to ensure that the things that can happen in London or can happen in Paris then can also happen in Dublin and in Barcelona. So, and for sure you will have one maybe point of contact in every city, but the work can be easily adapted to its needed. So this is something that we can ensure that we can use this kind of associations in order to ensure that things can be interoperable enough.
Absolutely, and I invite you guys here openly, if you guys want to learn more about this, or if you guys want to visit the facilities where this is happening, by all means, you're welcome.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Sure, let's go.
So yeah, talking about being green and sustainable, you know that Vantage Towers, as I said, is kind of emerging. We haven't done so much or so many like American Towers or Telnex, but I mean, we're gonna try to get there. But we have done EV charging, so we're trying also to how to reuse the sites we have and how we can help the citizens and also be greener. So we also deploy the EV charging, and also I think regarding the bin, recycle bin, I think American Towers, Telnex are also using that model because it's using an infrastructure that we already have in the cities, and then you just adding well, the coverage, I mean the equipment there to provide coverage. So I would say that we should try to reuse the urban landscape, and then with that, they're just doing additional to their
less is more.
Yeah, less is more.
In the city environment.
And you need to get really creative, sorry.
Yeah, that's why we're in the innovation team. So we have like crazy ideas.
Yeah, that's our role in our companies, trying to explore new ways to promote this host neutral host in the future. And I think we have talked about the technical issues that we have, so that the levels of sharing. We have talked about also the economics, which is a challenge as well. But I think something that is missing in this discussion is the legal and more how in the future the regulation could help as well, because this is something that is missing at the European level. For us as Cellnex, we are present at the European, many European countries, 12 today, and this is something that we are looking to have a common understanding regarding the legal and also the regulation in the future. So I think that the Gigabit Infrastructure Act could, as I said before, is one way that we can solve this issue. But we need to work together in this direction as well. So this is something that needs to be promoted. I think TIP is a good ecosystem to do so, and I invite you to join us and work together in this direction.
And that's a really good point. And coming back to that, I think one of the things that's part of our roadmap internally within Dublin City Council is trying to understand how we can better harness the power of data to support decisions on telecoms deployments. So in locations, where we have 3 operators wanting to deploy 3 separate instances of their equipment, and there's not enough physical space for that, how can we use data about the current level of network quality to determine what is the best type of deployment, which operator is the poorest there at the moment, can we use our policy power to enforce, a neutral host style solution, and that's one of the things that the CTA now, the City Telecoms Association, will help with, the cities coming together to produce common solutions to problems. And as you mentioned, Stelian, it's very much the case that one city like Barcelona or Dublin can act as a blueprint for others. And oftentimes it takes inspiration from somewhere else to prompt you to act yourself. While, within Dublin City Council, we were really inspired by Glasgow. Glasgow was the world leader in terms of their telecoms strategy, and the team there with Anne McLister, and we worked very closely with them to develop our own expertise. I think definitely from my point, the takeaway is collaboration is absolutely key between all the players in government, academia, and then as well in industry, of course, with the infrastructure providers, the operators, and then the vendors for the antennas, which are obviously, they need to be conform to the streetscape and things like that.
Thank you, Loken. I think as your role as a city also is to stimulate and to drive that urgency, right? Of, hey, this is the technology, we can do it better. Let's don't do it fast, let's accelerate, right? Because sometimes in the regulation, decision making, going through the city process, administrative, it can take forever, right? By this time, technology may change. So it's important to have this urgency in mind and say, hey, we don't want to be behind, we need to be ahead.
I think it was yesterday, this network, they were saying that for their deployment in Oran, they were saying it wasn't nothing technical. It was all the process behind that it was taking so long, and he was saying that was more challenge than the technical. And I think this morning, Cellnex, I think it was saying the same, that we're talking about technical, but then we forget about the process to have the end-to-end for the deployment. That might take longer than having the technical solution ready.
So that's something that in Gigabit Act is trying to be solved. Just even finding the city councils, if they are not, that's something that we are not in favor of that. But and I think one of the main solutions is to have something like Dublin has, no? So the one-stop shop where you have one single point of contact that then all the information regarding assets are more or less digitalized, but the idea is to put it that or related or in relation with touch with assets like lampposts or traffic lights that can be used in order to deploy sub-apps. So that's the idea. So put all the information there, and then for sure trying to limit the time on permits.
Yeah. So maybe to answer something or to complement, it's something that we need to work on is that how we can promote this kind of solution, because already we have worked on different ways to solve this problem, but sharing is caring, so we need to share all this information. So building these blueprints for different kind of deployments could be a solution to move forward on this kind issue that we are facing today.
Exactly, and I just give you some really tangible evidence of what William mentioned in terms of these solutions. So that Big Belly, it's called a Telebelly solution that was deployed in Dublin. That is composed of an array of different companies. So you have Alpha Wireless providing the antenna, the bin manufacturer is Big Belly, and then you have the civil works done by a company called Delmec in Ireland, and you have Cellnex as well. And that now is a platform that has been created into an all-in-one solution that can be purchased from the bin manufacturer, the antenna manufacturer. So that's, you know, and the IP and all has been protected. It's a solution you can actually buy on demand, plug and play, and it's good evidence of, you know, the kind of the commercial outputs of a test bed like this that is actually now active. You know, you can go and test the site and stuff like that. And I love the picture, William, that you showed of the Streetworks deployments in the UK. If we could just go back to the slide for 1 second, if you don't mind. Yeah, just here on the very left, you can see an array of cabinets. Internally, we would have called that Stonehenge sites. So many different cabinets, you know, so much clutter, not a good outcome for the city. And we really use those as a learning process of how, you know, we can avoid that in the Dublin context. And Cellnex have been very innovative in developing new streetwork solutions that integrate multiple operators' equipment into conformed cabinets, you know, on the streetwork side, and then obviously on the small cell side with the Big Belly solution. So, you know, new ways of thinking are needed, and I think with the collaboration we can definitely enable that.
At this point, I'd like to check with the audience if anybody has a question, because you can getting, and I'll share the mic.
Thanks very much. So Mark and Luke, with the solutions that were outlined by Edward, Mai and Paul of powering the baseband separately and having a single shared radio, do you think that would solve the dilemma you were mentioning about having enough power on a lamppost and therefore allow wider deployment more easily?
Yeah, so there are several points here. One, and maybe depending on the city, there's something to be a little bit different. But in Barcelona, let's say the priority is not to put more poles. So we don't want to deploy more poles. We have a lot of poles, so what we need to do is to share poles. So this is the main priority. So in Barcelona, the main priority is always urban landscape, beyond other things. So we are okay sharing lamppost. So that's not a problem. So you can just put your antenna there, and then we need to see where the baseband is going to be. That's something that it's not already solved, because we need some kind of cabinets. We don't like extra cabinets, so it's okay. So the problem is who is going to power it. And it's not a matter of kilowatts. It's just a matter of the quantity of energy, because for sure we have extra energy for lighting. But the problem is legal. It's from the legal perspective. So we are not allowed to share energy that it's not for the initial objective of it. So and then we need to call the power provider, which in our case is Endesa. We need to call them and say, okay, well, we have a pilot, or we can, but it's something irregular, so it's not, you know, it's not standardized. And then they can say, okay, yes, you can do that. It's on the pilot, no problem. The problem is when you want to deploy 1,000 of small cells, then you cannot call Endesa and say, hey, I'm going to steal a little bit of your energy. So that's the main problem. So we need to ensure to have separate power entrances for the small cells, and then typically this can put economical pressure there.
I'm delighted you asked the question, because with Cellnex, one of the things that we have examined in the Dublin context is creating a base station hotel style deployment. So in the city centre in Dublin, in St. Stephen's Green, there's a lot of underground unused public toilets that were used many, many years ago. And they actually, potentially in the future now, will have the functionality to house the type of equipment that you mentioned with the basebands. And then you have a very light site. And we see that the move to standalone will only make that even easier, you know, when you don't have to cater to the different other radio access technologies, you know, on the one site. So it's definitely something we're looking into. We've had conversations with Cellnex on that a while ago in Dublin, and you know, it's just a matter of progressing it, and hopefully that the operators will be on board as well. The operators a lot of the time are kind of the entity that put brake on things. You know, and we will hopefully try and overcome that.
Sorry, may I?
Yes.
Sorry, yeah. May I add, because I think Paul was kind of the question if we move also towards the O-RAN, correct? Because you want to ask to decouple and put the DU on site and the CU somewhere else, and then maybe we have the energy saving. I think that was the question. If it's under our radar, I'm assuming so, because if all of us, we are here in Fyuz, and the main topic is O-RAN, is something that I think all of us are kind of looking at. So I think the answer to your question is yes, I think, if, like we were saying, if the MNOs are willing to do that. We have in the forum of the O-RAN, so we can move the macro to the small cells as well, having the DU on site and the CU centralized.
Yes, so maybe to complete this idea, regarding the small cell is very interesting, because the O-RAN Alliance have these different use cases, and small cell is one of them. And I think the current specification for a small cell in the O-RAN Alliance is very mature to be deployed, because they have the front haul already do for that, so we can use this kind of configuration for a small cell, for instance. So it could be an option to work together, but I think at the end, this needs to be in cooperation with the actors, with the MNOs, with the cities, how we can build this kind of solution. I think it's possible to do so.
So I have a question back to Paul. Do you have the product?
Well, thank you very much. Question to actually the tower companies, because it's very interesting that the tower companies are here, right, and you're on stage. And I think, Paul, I stole from your previous panel that you said you're real estate company. So technology is powerful, real estate company, and then it comes down to people, culture, capabilities, collaboration. So question to the three tower companies, are you guys ready to understand and kind of really take the step in terms of really people and new skills, capabilities that all of this requires? And when is that step coming? Because I think it's a massive change from what you're doing today towards the technologies that we're outlining here and all the implication on people, business model. So just more, are you ready and when are you ready? Or is it a lab in Aachen kind of thing?
I think that's a great question. I think it does require, it has required a bit of reprogramming from the original, yes, we're great at steel and concrete mentality, to no, we need to play a slightly more active role in this ecosystem, in this new ecosystem. So no, I think the change is already happening. So we already understand that some of these new use cases, some of these new requirements are going to require for us to be a bit more active and work more closely, for instance, with our vendors. In Africa, we're already deploying radio access as a service alongside with Nokia. If you would have asked me for radio access as a service 5 years ago, I would have told you, let's talk in 5 years.
Yeah, so maybe from Cellnex's point of view, I think it depends on the level of sharing that we are talking about. For the passive way, this is our business as usual, so we already share passive. For the active, it could be more complicated. So it's, on one side, I think the strength of that company like Cellnex is that we usually work with other partners. So in this case, we are able to partnership to have also a big role on this kind of ecosystem share in the active way. So I think it could be a challenge, but we are in some way preparing that. My experience, I'm coming from a big MNO in Europe, so I have this experience, and I think this is possible for Atawerco or Infraco point of view. So I think we are paving the way to have that. And
so yeah, just to add what Paul saying, and sorry, I forgot your name, William. we just not concrete and power or metal. We just evolving now. So that's why we also have, for example, they were saying the R&D team. And as a William, I'm coming from a big MNO, red one, for 14 years, I think, or 17 years, I just lost it. And I'm coming from the radio side. So from my side, having the active sharing for me is it won't be a challenge. So it doesn't matter if I call Vantis Towers now. The knowledge is with me, and the tower companies are moving with more, not just like we were saying, just ion and power.
And just to back up those points, I think our experience definitely in Dublin has been that the infrastructure providers are much more pragmatic, much more ambitious and easier to work with than some of the mobile operators have been. You know, and that's our experience, but you know, that's different in different markets and there's different dynamics at play. But I think, you know, a lot of progress can be made by collaborating with them, and they've been very, very open, and I suppose the market has changed as the tower cos have took over the MNO's site portfolio, you know, so yeah, I suppose they have additional leverage now, but yeah, no, I think it's definitely a good question, and one that I'm fairly confident that the infrastructure cos will get there.
Thank you everyone. I think we are towards the end of our time today, so definitely if you have more questions, you can meet our speakers in the halls. But it's great, the dynamics. It's amazing to see the collaboration and the drive of the cities to utilize the technologies and find a way, even though it's a long process, but we'll get there. The future is promising. It seems there is a way to work more into sharing infrastructure, working more with the host, neutral host solutions. So thank you everyone for sharing your experience and being with us here today. And please.
Thank you.